She played when no one was watching, but a millionaire saw everything and fell in love. She played one forbidden song after hours. He was the billionaire who wasn't supposed to hear it. What started as a single melody in a quiet restaurant turned into a whirlwind that could save a forgotten music school or destroy his empire. When a former piano prodigy, haunted by stage fright, crosses paths with a powerful CEO with secrets of his own, their worlds collide in a storm of passion, legacy, and redemption. What did he hear in her music that changed everything? And what will she risk to reclaim the future she buried years ago? Watch the full story to find out before we begin the story. Leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our latest stories. Enjoy the story. The last notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major lingered in the air like whispers of a dream, delicate and haunting. Elena Marlowe's fingers hovered over the polished keys of the grand piano inside Le Coeur Lumière, the upscale French bistro tucked inside an old colonial building in downtown Charleston. She had played softly, just enough for her own ears, thinking the restaurant was finally empty after another exhausting shift. The dining room was dark, save for the flicker of candlelight on tables now cleared of wine glasses and laughter. It was a moment she stole for herself, something private in a life that no longer felt like her own. What do you think you're doing? The voice sliced through the quiet like a snapped violin string. Elena turned startled and met the icy stare of Michael, the restaurant manager. He stood rigid near the entrance to the dining room, his arms crossed, eyes narrowing with every passing second. "I'm sorry," Elena said quickly, rising from the piano bench. "I thought everyone had left. That piano is not for staff entertainment." Michael snapped. "It's a centerpiece, not a jukebox at a corner bar." Before Elena could respond, a second voice interrupted, calm yet commanding. "Actually, I asked her to play." A man stepped forward from the shadows, emerging near the curtained alcove of the private dining room. He was tall, in a tailored navy suit that whispered quiet power, and his expression was unreadable, though something in his eyes held a flicker of emotion that contradicted his otherwise polished exterior. Michael blinked. "Mr. Whitmore, I didn't realize you were still here." "I stayed behind to finish some correspondence," the man replied smoothly. "When I heard the music, I thought the restaurant had hired new talent. Quite remarkable playing." Elena's breath caught. She recognized him now. Graham Whitmore, real estate mogul. The name on half the buildings along the Carolina coastline, and the name at the bottom of the pending permit to demolish the Middleton School of Music, her childhood sanctuary. "Thank you for the compliment, Mr. Whitmore," she said, her tone tight as she stepped away from the piano. "But I should get back to closing up." "Of course," he replied, but his eyes followed her with interest. "I didn't catch your name." "Elena Marlowe." "Well, Miss Marlowe, you play with both precision and feeling." Chopin's Nocturne, Op. 9. No 2, if I'm not mistaken. Elena blinked. Classical music. My mother was a concert pianist. He said simply, "It was the soundscape of my childhood." The next moment passed in uncomfortable silence. Michael, ever the opportunist, broke it with a fawning tone. "Can I get you anything before we close, Mr. Whitmore?" "No, Graham said I'll be leaving shortly." As he left, Elena stood frozen by the waitstaff station. Her hands were still tingling from the keys, her heart not from embarrassment, but confusion. How could he be so casual, so seemingly moved by the music, and yet stand at the helm of a company ready to destroy the one place that once gave her life meaning? Later that night, Elena collapsed into the second-hand couch of her tiny apartment, still in her server uniform. Her ballet flats kicked off by the door. Her roommate Camille looked up from her laptop. "You're late, brutal night," Elena groaned. "Got caught playing the restaurant's piano." Camille's eyes widened. No. El Patron was about to explode when Mr. Big Shot Graham Whitmore himself shows up and says he asked me to play. Wait, that Graham Whitmore, the skyscraper guy? Elena nodded. Yep, the very one who's about to bulldoze Middleton Music School. Camille frowned. The place you used to practice at every day. When my dad died, and my mom couldn't afford lessons anymore, Mrs. Arlen, one of the instructors, taught me for free. It saved me. And now, his company's turning it into luxury condos. Camille asked quietly. Elena nodded. He didn't recognize me, but the weird part is, when he listened, he wasn't faking it. He knew the piece. He knew what it meant. Maybe he's not just some cold-hearted developer. Camille offered half-joking. Doesn't matter, Elena said. Getting up and walking to the digital keyboard tucked in the corner of their apartment, she placed her fingers on the plastic keys, but no music came. You haven't really played in months, Camille said softly. Not since. I don't perform anymore. Elena cut in. Not since I froze during that college recital, the one my mom saved 3 paychecks to fly out for. She turned away from the keyboard. I humiliate myself once, and I lose my nerve forever. It's easier not to try, or safer, Camille countered. But safety doesn't sound like Chopin. Elena didn't answer, but somewhere inside, that look on Graham Whitmore's face, as he listened to her, the one that looked less like a tycoon, and more like a man remembering something he'd buried, played over and over in her mind. Maybe it wasn't just the piano keys he had heard. Maybe for just a moment he'd heard her, and that terrified her more than the memory of failing ever could. What happens when 2 worlds that were never meant to collide suddenly begin to orbit each other through music memory, and something neither of them dared to name? This was just the beginning of a story that would test loyalty, legacy, and the courage to choose your own path. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next breathtaking chapter in the story of Elena Marlowe and Graham Whitmore. Trust us, what happens next will surprise you. The following week at Liqueur, Lumiere unfolded with its usual rhythm. Clinking glasses, murmured conversations, and the scent of truffle butter and seared scallops lingering in the air. But for Elena Marlowe, something had shifted. Every night, since the piano incident, Graham Whitmore had returned, always seated at table 11, a quiet corner, with a view of the wine cellar. He came alone. No entourage, no loud phone calls. He brought a leather-bound notebook and a single fountain pen, and he always requested Elena as his server. The first night, she thought it was coincidence. By the third, she wasn't so sure. He's here again, Camille whispered one evening, nodding subtly as Elena gathered menus. I noticed, Elena replied, trying to sound indifferent. He's definitely not here for the duck confit. Elena sighed. I think he's just comfortable with the routine. Some people don't like surprises. Camille teased, except the surprise of hearing you play. As Elena approached his table, she found him glancing through the wine list. His expression softened when he saw her. Miss Marlowe he greeted like he always did, formal, but with a warmth that felt curious. Good evening, Mr. Whitmore, she replied smoothly. Shall I recite tonight's specials? Please do. As she described the chef's latest creations, she noticed the way he listened, not just with polite interest, but attentively, as if he valued every word. It was disarming. Most customers looked through her, not at her. "I'll have the sea bass," he said at last, "and the Murso." "Your suggestion last time was excellent. Very good choice. The minerality pairs well with the fish." As she turned to leave, he stopped her. "You have a good palate," he said. "Do you study wine? I used to learn from our old sommelier between shifts," she said before she could stop herself. He said, "I had a decent nose. I'd say more than decent." Elena hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why are you back?" "Here. I mean, you come alone. You don't seem to eat much, and I know your schedule can't possibly be this free." Graham folded his hands. "You're right. I don't often make time for this, but lately I've realized I need to slow down because of the music, partly, and partly because I keep finding myself wanting to hear more of it, more of you." His words hung between them, soft and unassuming. Before Elena could reply, a voice cut in. "There you are, Mr. Whitmore. I've been looking for you." A woman in her late 50s appeared beside the table, elegant with sharp eyes and a polished demeanor. She gave Elena a cursory glance before turning to Graham. "Eliza Hartley." She introduced herself brusquely. "I'm Mr. Whitmore's development advisor." Elena offered a tight smile. "Nice to meet you, Eliza. This is Elena Marlowe. She's—" "I've read the report," Eliza interrupted. "We need to discuss the Middleton property immediately. There's pressure from the board to move forward." Elena stepped back, suddenly aware of her uniform. The wine glasses in her hands, the boundaries of their worlds drawn starkly in the tablecloth between them. "I'll bring your wine shortly," she said quietly, and walked away. That night, long after the restaurant closed, Elena stood outside the glass doors in the misty drizzle. She wasn't waiting. That's what she told herself. When the lobby doors finally opened, Graham stepped out. He saw her and stopped. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted. "Listen, if you're here because of some romantic idea about the mysterious waitress with a piano." "Elena, don't," she said gently. "Whatever connection you think we have, your company is still destroying a place that matters to people like me. To kids who don't have Steinways at home. That building gave me my voice. You're silencing it." Graham was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What if I told you I didn't know?" "What do you mean?" "That the Middleton School was where my mother studied. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore. She played that same nocturne every morning. I didn't recognize the building name until you mentioned it." Elena's breath caught. "She grew up in Charleston," he continued, "moved away when she married my father. I only connected the dots after I looked into it." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want to be the villain in your story. And maybe I don't have to be." Elena studied him in the soft glow of the streetlights. He looked tired, not the kind of tired that came from meetings or late dinners, but the kind that came from carrying the weight of a legacy he might never have chosen. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything." Yet he said, "Just meet me tomorrow morning, Middleton School, 10 a.m. She hesitated, then nodded once. "Okay." As she turned to go, he called softly, "Elena." She paused. "Thank you for not walking away." She didn't answer, but the smile that played at the edge of her lips was enough. Sometimes, the most unexpected conversations are the ones that begin to rewrite the ending. And this one, it was just getting started. Elena arrived at the old Middleton School building just before 10. Morning light filtered through a thin veil of mist, and the wrought iron gate creaked as she pushed it open. The air smelled of damp earth and faded ivy. Despite years of neglect, The place still carried echoes of music, whispers of scales and sonatas that once filled its narrow halls. Graham was already there. He stood near the entrance, dressed in a dark coat and scarf, reviewing a folder with blueprints in one hand and a coffee in the other. When he looked up and saw her, something in his expression softened. "You came," he said simply. "I said I would." They stood facing each other for a moment, both unsure where to begin. Finally, Elena gestured toward the building. "Is it true? Your mother studied here?" Graham nodded. "Her name was Elena Whitmore. Then I found some old recital programs in her belongings after she passed away. I didn't make the connection until recently. She never talked much about her childhood." Elena turned to the building. The chipped bricks and weather-worn windows didn't look like much, but she could still remember sitting cross-legged in the second-floor practice room, her fingers trembling over the keys as Mrs. Levitz adjusted her posture with firm but kind hands. "I haven't been back since I was 16, Elena said. When they shut down the scholarship program, Graham opened the door. With a key, he owned the building now and held it for her. The inside smelled like dust and time. Their footsteps echoed as they walked through the main corridor. Faded posters of winter concerts still clung to the bulletin boards. "She loved this place," Graham said quietly, looking around. "I didn't understand why until now." They stepped into the former recital hall, its once polished floors now dull, the stage warped from moisture. But the old baby, grand piano, was still there, in the corner, covered with a heavy tarp. "She used to hum when she played," he said suddenly. "Always in the mornings when she thought no one could hear her." Elena crossed the room, slowly, her hand brushing the piano's edge. She removed the tarp carefully. The instrument was dusty, but intact. Her fingers found the keys instinctively. She pressed one. The note was dull, but recognizable. "I remember that sound," she whispered. "Play something?" Graham urged gently. She shook her head. "Not now, not here." He didn't press her. Instead, he pulled a folder from his coat and handed it to her. "These are revised plans. A new proposal." Elena opened it slowly. Inside were sketches and detailed designs for converting the building into a community arts center, classrooms, rehearsal spaces, a restored recital hall, and outreach programs for underprivileged youth. There was even a plan for artist-in-residence apartments upstairs. "I submitted this version to the board last night," Graham said. "It means a massive shift in the timeline and a financial hit up front, but it's sustainable long-term. Grants, donors, event space, rentals. It's not a condo project anymore." Elena stared at him, stunned. "You're really doing this?" He nodded. "Because it matters. Because I saw the look in your eyes the night you talked about this place, and I realized I've spent too long ignoring the things that actually matter to people, to me." She lowered the folder. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You'd risk your reputation for this. I'd risk more than that." Silence filled the room, thick with history, hope, and something that neither of them dared to name just yet. Later, they stood outside the building again. The city, humming faintly in the distance. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "I present the proposal to the full board next week." Graham said, "It won't be easy. Victor won't go down without a fight." "And what about you?" she asked, tilting her head. "Why are you doing all of this?" "Because I've spent a lifetime making decisions based on numbers. This is the first time I'm making one based on meaning." Their eyes met. Something vulnerable passed between them. "Elena," he said carefully, "I know how different our worlds are. And I know this us might be complicated. but I'd rather live in the complication than keep pretending it doesn't matter. She didn't answer immediately. She looked past him, toward the street, then back at the building behind her. I don't have all the answers, she said finally. But I know this place deserves a second chance, and maybe I do too. His voice was quiet. You do. The next day, Elena found a small package in her mailbox. No note, just a wrapped music journal and a fountain pen, identical to Graham's. The cover was embossed with her name. Inside, a single line had been written in delicate handwriting. For when you're ready to write your next movement. She stared at the words for a long time, the pen resting gently in her palm. Her hands were still. No tremble, no panic, just the quiet sense that something long dormant was waking again. Whatever came next, recitals, choices, second chances, she knew. Now she wouldn't face them alone, and somewhere behind the scenes, the music had already begun. The boardroom buzzed with quiet tension. Seated around a long glass table were investors, legal advisors, and board members of Westbridge Holdings. Graham stood at the head, his back straight, jaw tight. The proposal for the Community Arts Center was projected behind him, a colorful rendering of repurposed classrooms, open studios, and a recital hall alive with possibility. He wasn't used to this kind of pitch, not driven by returns, but by resonance. As you can see, Graham said, gesturing toward the screen, the projected net return isn't immediate. But by year 3, the model becomes self-sustaining. We've outlined grant partnerships, public-private funding, and a donor campaign with early commitments from alumni of the school itself. Victor Langston, seated at the far end, leaned back in his chair with a dismissive smirk. And where in this inspiring tale of civic virtue do shareholders see their benefit? We're a development firm, not a charity foundation. Graham met his gaze, unwavering. Legacy matters too. Brand identity, public trust. These aren't just abstract ideas. They're currency. If we bulldoze this building, we become another faceless developer. But if we preserve it, we become part of something people remember. Victor's lip curled. Nostalgia doesn't pay dividends. A woman from the legal team leaned forward. The structure is eligible for historic designation. That could open us up to tax credits and preservation grants. Another board member added plus, with our name attached to something meaningful. Community resistance to future projects might soften that has value. The conversation shifted. Graham listened, spoke where needed, but stayed calm. Even when Victor challenged every line of the proposal, he had expected this. But he also had something Victor didn't, the truth on his side. And Elena, after the meeting adjourned, Graham stepped into the hallway, exhaling for the first time in hours. He didn't notice Thomas until his assistant handed him a folder. They're leaning your way, Thomas said. Victor pushed hard, but public sentiment has shifted. The school's story hit the local paper this morning. Editorial support is building. Graham took the folder, but didn't open it. Any word from Elena? She's already at the recital hall, preparing for her first performance in almost a decade. Graham nodded, but his expression darkened slightly. She doesn't know how bad it's gotten with Victor, he murmured. Or how much I've risked for this. She'll know tonight, Thomas said simply. After the music starts, everything else will fall into place. The newly refurbished recital hall in the Middleton Arts Center shimmered under soft chandeliers. Rows of seats filled quickly. Friends, former students, supporters, and a few cautious board members curious to see what this dream looked like in real life. Backstage, Elena sat alone in the green room, her dress a soft dove gray, her hair swept back with care. Her hands were steady, folded in her lap. For once, the silence around her wasn't ominous. It was full of anticipation. Diana appeared in the doorway holding a small wrapped box. "He left this with the stage manager," she said, placing it beside Elena. Didn't say a word, just smiled and walked off like he was holding his breath. Elena opened the box slowly. Inside was a necklace, simple, elegant, with a tiny gold charm shaped like a treble clef. Beneath it, a card in Graham's handwriting, "For the music, only. You could have brought back to life." A lump formed in her throat. She didn't have time to dwell on it. There was a knock at the door. "They're ready for you." As Elena stepped onto the stage, the applause that greeted her was warm and patient. She moved toward the grand piano, polished tuned waiting, and sat without ceremony. No lights blinded her. No expectations weighed on her. Just the keys, just the notes she had long kept locked inside. She played Chopin first, then Debussy, and then her own composition, something she had written in the quiet hours after her first walk through the abandoned school with Graham. It was hopeful, unfinished, but real. When the final note faded, there was a pause, a breath, and then the audience rose to their feet. Through the standing ovation, Elena saw him, Graham near the backhands, clasped in front of him, his face unreadable. When she met his eyes, he nodded once. There was something in that gesture, pride, apology, longing that said what words couldn't. Later, as guests mingled with wine and laughter, Elena slipped away toward the old practice room. She found Graham there seated on the window ledge looking out at the evening. "You made it," she said softly. He turned, stood. "I wouldn't have missed it." "Was it enough?" she asked. "To convince the board?" He took a step closer. "The board voted this afternoon. The Arts Center stays. You stay." Relief passed over her face, and Victor resigned. Effective immediately. Elena blinked. Because of this, because of 100 small things that added up, Graham said. But this was the one that mattered. They stood in silence, the soft glow of hallway lights painting gold across the floor. "You changed everything," he said. "You reminded me who I wanted to be before I became someone else." Elena reached for his hand. "You didn't change because of me. You just stopped pretending." His laugh was quiet, self-conscious. "What happens now?" "I leave in 3 weeks," she said. "The first leg of the fellowship, Florence." Graham nodded slowly. "And after I come back," she said, "if there's still something worth coming back to." He looked at her, then really looked. "There will be." They stayed like that for a long moment. Hand in hand, past and future converging in the quiet room where dreams once began and had now begun again. Outside, the streetlights flickered to life, and inside, the music continued. The air in Florence carried the scent of old stone espresso and spring rain. Elena walked the narrow, cobbled streets with a violinist's rhythm in her step, the city an echo of music itself. Every piazza seemed to hum with possibility. It had been 2 months since she arrived for the first leg of the Westmore Fellowship. Her days were filled with master classes and studio hours. Her evenings spent in quiet concert halls where the notes of centuries lingered in the walls. But in every melody, in every morning, light slanting across the Tuscan skyline, there was one note missing Graham. He wrote, of course, letters, not emails. Thoughtful, measured, signed with his initials, and sometimes a memory. A photo of the newly painted recital hall. A menu from a food truck outside the Arts Center with a handwritten note. "You'd hate this. but I miss laughing about it with you." He sent updates on student enrollment, on community classes, and once a program from a local children's performance titled A Night of First Notes. Her responses were slower, but no less heartfelt. She told him about the professors who challenged her, the fear that still gripped her before performing, and the small boy who waited outside the conservatory every afternoon just to hear her practice through the open windows. They didn't define their relationship, not in writing, but it lived in the silence between paragraphs, in the weight of unspoken things. 3 months passed when she returned to New York for the first break in her fellowship. The city greeted her like an old friend. Elena arrived at the Middleton Arts Center on a sun-drenched morning. The front steps had been polished. A new banner fluttered above the entrance, and the front desk now displayed a photo of the building as it once was juxtaposed with what it had become. She found Graham in the practice hall, not at the piano, but in a folding chair, listening intently to a young girl rehearsing her first recital piece. He looked up the moment he sensed her presence. His expression didn't change dramatically, but something softened. "I was wondering if Florence would steal you," he said as he stood. "It tried." "Elena," replied, her voice light, but it didn't win. Their embrace was brief, but certain, familiar. When they finally stepped back, she smiled. "You kept everything exactly as I remember. We made a few changes," he said, nodding toward the hall. But the soul stayed. The weeks that followed were a rhythm of homecoming and rediscovery. Elena taught weekend classes, coached young performers, and helped curate the fall concert series. She would return to Europe soon. Vienna was next, but the time in New York felt rooted now. Not like a layover, but a foundation. With each performance, each student, her confidence grew not only as a musician, but as someone who had chosen the harder road and hadn't walked it alone. One Friday evening, Graham took her to a rooftop garden overlooking the skyline. The sun dipped behind the city, gilding everything in gold. "I've been thinking," he said, as they leaned against the railing, "about how we keep finding our way back to this." Elena turned to him. "To what?" "This," he said, gesturing not to the view, but between them. "This, whatever we are. It keeps growing, even when we're apart. And I realized I don't want to keep starting and pausing. I want continuity." She studied his face open, unguarded. "I want to keep building." Graham continued. "Not just centers and programs, but a life that has you in it. Whether it's New York or Florence or wherever your music takes you." Elena felt her breath catch. So he said, pulling a small ring box from his coat pocket, "I'm not asking you to give up anything. I'm asking if I can be a part of it." The box opened to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a sapphire the color of dusk. Elena stared at it speechless for a moment, and then nodded once, then again. "Yes," she whispered, "to all of it." The kiss they shared then wasn't dramatic or theatrical. It was steady, like the closing note of a sonata that had resolved after a long, beautiful journey. 1 year later, the Middleton Arts Center buzzed with celebration. Elena's fellowship had ended, but her presence in the city had not. She and Graham had quietly married in a garden ceremony, attended by friends, students, and faculty, with Professor Halberd playing a waltz on an upright piano as they walked down the aisle. Now, on the evening of the Art Center's first anniversary gala, Elena took the stage once again. Her gown was midnight blue, her hair pinned with silver leaves, a quiet nod to the city where she rediscovered her passion. Graham stood in the wings, watching as she introduced a group of young students set to perform a piece she had arranged for them. The crowd listened enchanted as the students played with hearts full of wonder. And Elena, standing beside them, felt something bloom inside her that had once been buried beneath fear. After the performance, as the room filled with applause and chatter, Graham found her beneath the same chandelier where they'd first outlined the idea of saving the school. "I have one more surprise," he said, handing her a small folder. Inside was a proposal, plans for a new arts initiative, the Ward Aldridge Fellowship, designed for young musicians from underrepresented communities to train, perform, and tour globally. She looked up, tears brimming. "This is your doing." "It's ours," he said simply. Later, that night, as they locked up the center, the city quiet around them, Elena stepped to the old piano in the corner of the foyer and pressed a single note. Clear, soft, resonant. Graham smiled beside her. "Still in tune," he said. She nodded. "And still ours." The music had never left her. It had waited just like he had. And now it played not only through her hands, but in every corner of the life they were building, together, in harmony always. The story of Elena Marlowe and Graham Whitmore is a tender symphony of courage, healing, and unexpected love set against the backdrop of forgotten music and revived purpose. Elena, once a young prodigy, silenced by trauma and fear, lived in the quiet shadows of her past. Working in a restaurant where no one knew her story, she found solace only when her fingers brushed piano keys in solitude. Graham, a powerful but emotionally guarded developer, entered her world not with grand declarations, but by simply listening first to her music, then to her truth. What began as a chance encounter between two people from vastly different worlds became a profound journey of rediscovery for them both. For Elena, it meant confronting her fears and returning to the stage, reclaiming the part of herself she had long buried. For Graham, it meant stepping away from cold, calculated decisions to embrace values rooted in legacy, emotion, and community. Together, they breathed life back into a neglected art center and into each other. Their bond was never defined by glamour or convenience, but by quiet moments, letters sent across oceans, duets played in empty halls, and the simple act of showing up when it mattered most. Their love grew slowly but deeply grounded in respect and a shared desire to preserve beauty even when it didn't make financial sense. Theirs is a love story where music became the bridge not only between hearts, but between generations and communities. From a nervous waitress playing secretly after hours to a celebrated pianist standing before global audiences, Elena's transformation reminds us that talent may sleep, but it never dies. Graham's arc, from a man driven by profit to one moved by purpose, teaches us that power wielded with empathy becomes something far greater than control. In building something meaningful together, they didn't just find love, they found legacy. The lesson here is profound. Our past doesn't define us, but facing it with honesty can help us heal. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to keep playing even when our hands tremble. And sometimes, the most life-changing opportunities arise when we dare to pursue what stirs our soul, not what the world expects of us. So we ask you, what resonated most with you in Elena and Graham's journey? Have you ever had a dream you put away for too long? What held you back, and what would it take to step forward again? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective could be the note that inspires someone else to take their first brave step. And if this story touched your heart, if you believe in the magic of second chances, quiet resilience, and love that grows from the most unexpected places, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to bring these soul-stirring stories to life, one beautiful chapter at a time.